questions I got, but things are getting crazier. Misinformation is everywhere, so I'm on a mission to find the best minds with answers on how we fix it. It's time to drop some knowledge. Let's go. We're dropping knowledge today with Luke Burgis. This guy wrote one of the most important books I think I have read in my life, and I've read a lot of books. He's been praised by Adam Grant, Ryan Holiday, Jonathan Haidt, some of the greatest thinkers in the world, some of the biggest celebrities. He's been featured on so many podcasts, and his book has blown up in the smartest people thinking circles in the world. And I think it's going to blow up worldwide because it says so many important things. So it's my pleasure and my honor that I get to speak to Luke Burgis one-on-one right now about his book. It's called Wanting: The Power of Mimetic Desire. I hope I did a fair introduction, man. How are you doing?
Man, that was more than fair. The pleasure is all mine, Will. I'm doing fantastic. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. It's Vegas. We're pre-oven. We're doing music hard, but one of the biggest things, during the COVID times is I got to really immerse into deep thought and deep thinking. With so much misinformation in the world. And I came across your book through one of my favorite YouTube channels, Big Think. And it just had, your interview was 5 minutes and it had such an impact on me. And you talked about these concepts that I thought were really powerful and really important, about things that maybe the average person doesn't really realize what a big impact it has, right? So do you want to tell us about that? Like, what is it that what's the core of wanting? What is it about?
I think it's about something that most people do have a tacit knowledge of once they hear it and once they get a word to name this thing that they've seen in life, right? I feel like part of what I did was just give a name to something that's universal. So my book is about why people want the things that they want, how desire is generated and is shaped in the first place. And it happens in a surprising way. Most of us think that we want the things that we want, either because the thing that we want has some objective qualities about it that make it desirable, or that we generate our own desires, on our own, right? They just kind of come from out of our hearts, mysteriously and spontaneously. And this thinker that I studied, René Girard, who's a French social theorist, he had studied human history. He studied sort of human social relations and psychology. And he came to the conclusion that the nature of human desire is mimetic, meaning that we imitate what other people want almost always without really knowing it, right? So there's usually a third person or a third group that is mediating or modeling my desire for something else, right? And to just drive this home and to make it really clear for how this works. When I was in high school, for instance, there was a girl, beautiful girl, who asked me to prom. And I'd never really paid attention to her. I didn't even know who she was. I was flattered, but I didn't think that going to the prom was that cool. And I said, thanks, but no, right? I feel horrible even telling the story. 1 week later, another guy that played on the football team with me, who was kind of my rival on the football field, really cool guy, good looking guy, he asked her to the prom and she said yes. And she was thrilled. And, she was strutting down the hallways every day. And I saw the two of them together and they were happy. And now all of a sudden I was filled with this overwhelming desire to go get her back. And I asked her to the prom and she said, no, I've already got a prom date.
Right.
I was devastated by that. So what changed, right? What happened there? Well, now I had this model of desire. Like there was somebody else in the picture, and he was really affecting the way that I viewed the situation, right? He was affecting my desires. So that's kind of the core idea of my book, is that the nature of our desire is social. We're affected by what other people want, and it affects us in ways that go deeper than we realize and in ways that we often don't even like to admit.
I love that. I love that we don't even like to admit. And I think what made me resonate with the book so much is I had a lot of these vague ideas, even myself growing up. I grew up
kind of an identity crisis. I was born in Canada. My parents are Syrian, Muslim. So really in our culture, Islamic identity, Arab identity is so, so important and powerful. And, I would grow up, in many ways confused because I had, I'd go to my Canadian school by day. And then on weekends, we go to Islamic school. And I came across often conflicting desires, right? And it helped me even question things more. I started wondering, what about religion is right? What about religion is wrong? And then at about 12 years old, we made a profound move. We moved across Canada, and that was like a crisis as a kid. Everything I knew about the world changed so drastically, and I was immersed in not a completely different culture, but a significantly different part of Canada. And then again, I had moved, from at the age of 24, I moved from Canada to DJing on a cruise ship out of Texas. So I had an even more profound change. And, now I've immersed myself in so many different cultures and so many different places. And I've experienced a lot of what you talk about. And it's given me this unique perspective of, trying to be objective about exactly, it's sort of had this sort of ethereal feel on me. And what I loved so much about your book, it gave it so much more meaning and definition that I felt, but I didn't fully understand. And I love how you break it down in simple ways, because it really breaks down a monkey see, monkey do in some ways, but then it does get a little more complex. You talk about, things like you break it down between, I love your terms here, by the way, Freshmanistan and Celebristan. Can you tell us more about how these interact and the interplay and the effects on people?
Yeah, and I can probably tell a little bit of that story and explain it through my own life.
Sure.
So, we human beings are really good at imitation. Okay, it's how we learn language. It's how education works. If we weren't really good imitators, we wouldn't have culture. We wouldn't have music. We build off of things. We learn, we imitate, and then we innovate.
We're built for imitation.
We're built for imitation. But the subtle point is that we don't just imitate external things. We even imitate the desires of other people. Like, we can go underneath the surface and not just imitate how somebody dresses or how somebody talks, their culture. We intuit what they want, and we can even imitate that probably without even knowing it. We're really good at that. And there's been studies that show that even toddlers can get under the surface of what other people want. Even when those people tell them they want something, if they're lying about their desires, even toddlers can intuit what they really want. And right. As we get older, as we become adults, we just become even better at that, right? Like, we can usually tell when somebody's bullshitting us. We're reading the room at all times, and then we're mimicking the desires of other people. And this comes into play with lifestyle in a major way. I was an only child that grew up in West Michigan and outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And because I was an only child, like, I had to look outside of my family for all of my models. I didn't have like an older brother or anybody to look to. So I had to look outside of my family, and my kind of like, middle class, kind of boring life. I needed powerful, like, attractive models to look to, right? So I found them on MTV. I found them like in AOL chat rooms and on the coasts, right? I found them in hip hop, especially.
Me too.
I found, and I was especially attracted to like kind of like the tough, hard life, right? Like where a certain kind of lifestyle was glorified.
Can I just stop you for a sec there? So what's interesting, you grew up in Western Michigan. I grew up in, at that time I was in, suburban Canada, and yet we had similar mimesis, right? Like, you wanted that tough, and same with me. I was into underground, old school, now it's old school, but at the time it was the streets. It was about living the real life or keeping it real. Like, we shared these desires because things at the time were scaled, right? hip hop, this is sort of pre-internet or pre-scale of internet, right? Which is fascinating. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of make a point of that because it's fascinating. We came from different parts and yet we desired the same stuff, similar stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I think we were probably both coming of age in like the 90s and 2000s, and
Yep.
there were some powerful models at that time, right?
Right.
Some really powerful models at that time. So yeah, I mean, I literally can tell you that I went to New York City. I went to college in New York City for no other reason that I had some dreams that I was going to be like running the streets of Queens with Nas or something like that. I mean, that's like why. I mean, I had these fantasies. I was like projecting all these things.
Right.
Went to school, this little school called Pace University downtown. I transferred into NYU. And then when I got there, all of a sudden, like, that's not what I wanted anymore. All of a sudden, I had different models around me, people that told me that I should major in business and go work on Wall Street. And I was heavily infected by that desire. And that's what I did. And then I got on Wall Street and I hated it. I was totally disillusioned. And then I left and moved to California and started my first company and became an entrepreneur. And then even that got boring to me after a while. And I started to look back at my life and I realized like just how affected I was and influenced by the various models that I adopted, right? The things that were glorified by the people around me, like, heavily affected me. And I would have never admitted that in the moment. It was only when I could look back later and I saw, oh, wow, like so like, what is it that you really want, Luke? It just seems like when you're embedded in an environment, right? Especially because I didn't really have a good sense of self at that time. And the less sense of self you have, like the more you latch on to other people's who seem like they have a firm sense of who they are.
Right. And I think that's
those people become incredibly attractive, right? And like that's what the guys in the music videos are projecting. I know who I am. I know exactly who I am.
And I actually wanted to touch on that later on in our discussion, but we may as well bring that up now. So, I'm fascinated with the neurology of the brain and its complex interplay between what we want and insecurity. I mean, there has been studies of status and its role in insecurity. So I think you touch on something important here, which is confidence, or the portrayal of success and its impact on mimesis, right? So you have this projection of success and confidence that can then play upon people that are insecure. Do you think insecurity plays a role in mimesis?
Plays a huge role. I mean, it just makes it more likely that we're going to behave in highly mimetic ways, right? That we're going to just adopt models very easily. But I think that on the flip side of that, I think that a lot of people sort of intuitively know that they become models for other people the more confidence they project. Like, so everybody's sort of, it's kind of this idea that when you're starting a company, I've founded a few companies, this kind of like fake it till you make it idea. Yes. Where if I'm starting out, my company's struggling, trying to raise money, I've got all these insecurities. I have to go to like all of the parties in Silicon Valley and just like project this idea that things are going really well, and that I'm really confident. Because if I don't do that, first of all, nobody will give me any money. And then, there's like this weird self-fulfilling prophecy. And like, actually, when you get people to be honest and you're like, bro, you okay? How are things really going?
Right.
Good. How are things really going? And then you finally get them to like open up. There's this sort of game that everybody plays because we know that I think intuitively, we all know that we live in this world where people are taking cues from us based on the level of confidence that we project. And the more confidence somebody projects, it's a confidence game, right? There's a word for this, right? Like the best con artist is the one that projects confidence, and we tend to trust those people more than other people.
Yes, I agree. So, what I think the issue of that, of course, is it's problematic on a couple layers, because not always the most confident person is always the most right, or it's the person that projects the most confidence. And paradoxically, we know that those that are most informed are also the most pensive and the most tentative in their ideas. Those that project that confidence reflect or have a bigger impact. And that's why things like critical thinking skills are so critical in people's understanding. And now we live in this information age where people have been able to hijack these things, and and it's leading to what your book talks about, I think, which are these mimetic rivalries. Can we talk about that? Like I was saying before, I love these concepts of Freshmanistan and Celebristan. I think you break it down, and I think it was chapter 2 where you really the meat and potatoes of what you talk about for the whole book is really in that second chapter about that. And I, as far as I know, I don't know anyone else that has broken it down like you have in that book or in your book.
Let me break down those two worlds, right? I think this is a really important part to understand.
Yes,
I just want to say on the last point on confidence, though, this is extremely relevant to the world we live in because of sort of the political environment that we live in, right? Like sort of populist politics, right? Like when have you ever seen like a populist politician get up there and give a speech that's sort of nuanced and, well, I'm not really sure about this. And, This is a complicated issue. They can't, right? I mean, it's gotta be like fists on the table. This is the way it is, the projection of confidence, right? It's gotta be that way. So this is why what we're talking about is really, really important when it comes to the kinds of models that some people adopt. There are two major kinds of models of desire, and they affect us in different ways. So in the book, I talk about these. So the first kind is the kind of model that's outside of our world, okay? And I say that these models live in a world that we can call Celebristan, right? We're probably not going to come into contact with them. They're either dead or they just live in like a totally different social sphere than we do. So we can imitate them. They can be a model to us in some way, but I'm never going to become their rival, and they're never going to see me as their rival, right? Like I'm never going to compete, with Justin Timberlake for status, right? When it comes to like his music and stuff and his social life. So it's safe, okay? Like that kind of imitation is generally safe. The other kind of model comes from inside of our world, and we call this an internal mediator of desire, internal model of desire. And these people, I say, live in Freshmanistan because it's kind of like the world that we all went through when we were a freshman in high school or college, if you went to college. We have a lot in common. We're close to these people. We come into contact with them, and we can become rivals to them. Yet they also affect our desires and can be models of desire to us, but they're very different than the other kind of model because, first of all, we never really want to admit that these people are models to us because they're our coworkers, they're our peers, they might even be our friends, they might even be our sibling. Yet these are even more powerful models of desire on us than the ones that live in Celebristan. Like I might buy Air Jordans because I think, they're good shoes and Michael Jordan's a great basketball player. But it's never going to sort of affect my personal relationship with him. If though, I live in the same, city as somebody else that does the same thing that I do. This person is very close to me. Me looking to that person and comparing and paying attention to what they're doing can lead to serious rivalry, and sort of make both of us miserable if we both engage in that kind of a game, right? So that it's really important to sort of understand, like, well, what world does this model come from? All of those models for me in my early life were in Celebristan. They lived in different cities. They were on music videos. I wasn't going to come into contact with them. I would recognize them as models. If you had asked me in high school, hey, like, who do you aspire to be like, right? I mean, I could have named people that I saw like in the news, and I could have, and I would have comfortably done that. But once I got into the same class as them in college, and you asked me who's influencing you now, Luke, I never would have been like, oh, it's that guy that that is vying for the same internship as me or who wants the same job as me, I never would have said that. Yet, like, those people were influencing me at a very deep level.
Right. And the competition can be very unhealthy. You talk about that, right? The mimetic rivalry. So, here's where, here's my 2 cents. And I want to get your thoughts on this is, we've got social media and, back, let's go back to what we both talked about, in the early 90s, 2000s, or the mid 90s, 2000s, we had similar mimetic celebrities in Celebristan and these rappers from New York. And yet we were from different places. Now the world's gotten a lot fuzzier, right? We've got social media. Does it blur the lines between Freshmanistan and Celebristan? Are we living in a world now where, celebrities are more accessible than ever? Are we identifying with them more? Are they becoming, is the mimetic, is it almost turning rivalrous with celebrities more? And, or are we taking on identities more from people that aren't as universal? So, we have these sort of mini influencers that can still have substantial followings, but they're very niche, right?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what's happening. I mean, it's so basically what social media has done is it's kind of like mashed up these two worlds into one and made everything very confusing. Like, there used to be like a pretty big distinction between Freshmanistan and Celebristan. But social media, first of all, it just exposes us to a lot more models of desire, right? I mean, I log on to Instagram or TikTok or Twitter or something like that, and I'm scrolling through millions of people that are modeling millions of ideas, millions of desires. It's just harder to sift through it, to make sense of it, to know how it's affecting me than ever before. Like, when I was in 8th grade, I could, flip through Rolling Stone and sort of, read certain stories and be like, oh, like, I'll never forget to this day. Like, I was flipping through, I think I was in 7th or 8th grade, and I flipped through the story, and it was like, there's this new kid out there under Dr. Dre named Eminem, and he's going to be like the biggest rapper in the world. And I saw that story, and I was like, oh, that's crazy.
What was the source? Probably.
It was either Source or Rolling Stone, man. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Right. So, but we were reading the same stuff, right? Instead of 100 different blogs, there's probably only one or two, right? There was, Rolling Stone, Source, and there was maybe one other rap magazine, right? So, like, I could have named like the handful. It was a handful of sources that I would have been able to tell you were affecting me. And today, I mean, I don't know what it's like to be 14 today because I'm 40. But I mean, I can't even, the number of influences on me and on anybody are in the thousands on it, sometimes even on a daily basis, right? And and also the mashup is really important. So it does, like, people appear to us, even celebrities appear to us as accessible and like people that we can come into contact with, right? Which, and this is why I'm talking about this the blurring of Freshmanistan and Celebristan. That was the idea that came when I was reading about that. Sorry, continue.
It's almost like there is no more. It's almost as if there really is no more Celebristan anymore, right? It's almost like we're all in Freshmanistan in a way, in the sense that, like, I can DM somebody on Instagram and maybe even get a response, or I can tweet at somebody, maybe even the president of the United States, and he might tweet back at me, right? That's a crazy world to live in, because it means, like, 10, 15 years ago, that would have been unthinkable, to be able to have that kind of an interaction. So now we're all kind of playing in the same boat here. And it's sort of raised the stakes. It's raised the level of tension. And there are so many people out there that, some of us can adopt, I don't know, like multiple models of desire in the course of the same day. Whereas, when I grew up, I had, mine were relatively stable, is one way to put it.
Is it making things better or worse? I know that's a general statement, but what direction are we going right now? Like, we've got Elon Musk, right? Just bought Twitter, and we've got a lot of people very happy about that, right? So, My social media feeds are mostly very excited about it. There's some people that are very concerned about it. Is it, you know, what do you think? Are things getting, is this a good direct? Are we moving in general, are we moving in a better direction because of this blurring of Freshmanistan and Celebristan?
I mean, Elon Musk aside, I think social media is, I think, I don't want to make this seem like a cop-out answer. I think that it's both. I think that it is making things better in terms of, it's connecting us to more ideas than ever before. People are able to start businesses due to social media, right? Some
right.
businesses are entirely social media based and earn an income that way. It's done a lot of really positive things. It's diffused mimetic desire in a weird way because there's so many people out there. It's harder for us to become fixated on any one person. So in a way, it's diffused it. But I think in general, I would say it's trending in the wrong direction, right? I think it's trending in the wrong direction because it's hard. It's more confusing than ever. Who to follow, right? Who to trust, right? Information, misinformation. And it's just too much, right? There's too much noise and it's overwhelming. And it's almost as if,
and the human brain's not designed for that.
It's not designed for that. We haven't morally matured in a way that will allow us to handle the technology that we've developed. That's my opinion, right? Like we've invested so much energy into tech and not a whole lot of energy into understanding and probing some serious moral questions. We've ran way out ahead of it.
I agree with you. With everybody praising free speech, that's been the big subject with Elon Musk. I would say in a utopia, free speech is fantastic. In a utopia, you'd have a game of football and you wouldn't need a referee, right? Because everybody would know the rules and they would all follow them. And if you won or lose, it was because of being honorably fair. But we all know that's not how reality works. That's why we have a referee that decides and sometimes the referee makes a bad call. Sometimes they make the wrong call. But at the end of the day, we say it's better to have the referee than no referee. Right. So we know with information, bad information spreads 11 times quicker. We know that there's bad agents out there. We know that there's bad agents with heaps of money. We know that there's powerful rhetoricians. Is that even a word? People that are experts in rhetoric that can that know how to hijack these weaknesses in the human brain that most people aren't aware of. What I love so much about your book is it really, if there's an underlying theme, is I didn't even know this was happening. Right. Yeah. And I think that's with so many things in life. And I think that's how people become victims of things, is that they're not even aware. It's happening at a level that they're not aware of. And this is why critical thinking skills are so important. There's a host of things going on. I'm just looking for a quote that I read literally on a YouTube comment that resonated so powerfully with me. And here it is. The people who are most vulnerable to bad ideas are those who want desperately to be smarter than they really are. They can even be pretty darn smart, but if they're not comfortable with whatever their level of knowledge, intelligence, and critical thinking skills may be, and the fact that there are higher levels, then they will be desperate to believe anyone that makes them feel like the smartest person in the room. And I think there's people that know how to play on that. And I think that this wonderful idea of freedom to do what we like, this wonderful, we have these ideologies, right? We have communism, where to each his need, from each his ability. What a wonderful idea, right? I mean, how could you not inherently want that for society? But we know in practice, it's led to the biggest amount of deaths ever in the world, right? A low ball estimate is 100 million people have died, right, through communist China and Russia and under Stalin and Mao, right? So these are great ideas. You look at libertarian ideas, someone who, with my education, which is economics, money and banking, when people talk about great ideas like, or what they think to be crypto, we only need to look 15 years back when we started deregulating the housing industry, what a disaster that became.
Mm-hmm.
So, we need to move society forward, but it has to come with the humanization at the same time, which, and until that catches up, we can't let this part get too far ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, anger is also more mimetic than other emotions too, right? I mean, there's been studies that have shown that anger spreads faster on social media. And there are people that know how to say things in the most inflammatory way possible, because they know that it gets more retweets and engagement, and it spreads faster.
And the social media companies know that. So
they're the ones that profit from it, and speaking of free speech, right? The problem is, you ask 10 people what that means and you're going to get 10 different answers.
Exactly.
Okay? And, even the US Supreme Court has struggled to define free speech, right? Like, there are free speech absolutists, right? But, the US Supreme Court has said that you can't imminently incite violence through your words, right? You can't do that. You can burn a flag, but at least during the Vietnam War, you couldn't burn your draft card. Burn the flag, can't burn a draft card. So like, the US Supreme Court has struggled even to understand what this means.
Exactly.
And now you've got millions of people out there, like, sort of debating, which is good. I think that
I love debate. And what people have to understand is, again, and part of the problem is we're not getting the full story. And we're getting the story told by people with vested interests to tell a certain story. Right. So, and I find that fascinating, when we talk about, I don't think there's a better example for your book, in my opinion, presently, than crypto, Bitcoin. And it fascinates me so much because, of course, you became acquainted with Peter Thiel because you both share this love for Rene Girard. And what I found so utterly fascinating in your book, I remember you mentioned that even Peter Thiel fails to see when he's being mimetic. And he recently made a comment, basically making fun of Warren Buffett, saying he's a we have to get these geriatric ideas out, and for him, he's really trying to push crypto, and nothing, in my opinion, is more mimetic today than Bitcoin and NFTs. And that's because I understand the full picture of it. When I was a musician and the idea of NFTs came out, I was like, wow, this could be the second coming of the music industry. This is wonderful. And then when I examined it deeply, just like I examined Bitcoin deeply, you realize just how flawed it is and how it's essentially a glorified Ponzi scheme. Anybody that understands money on a first-year college level can tell you that. And yet, literally millions and millions of people think it's the future. And it's taken on a religious ferocity. And I think that's a clue to people to say, anytime anything takes on a religious ferocity, I think that's a red flag. And so this ultimately, think this is where I want to, where it comes full circle. Can we redeem mimesis? Is there a way to take it from bad ideas? And I mean, you do touch on this in your book. I love that, but I'm going to offer my own insights, but I would love for you to share that. And how do we go from these bad ideas? You talk about a metamorphosis, which I feel like I'm going through on a personal level, and I've been going through. But how do we do that?
Yeah. I think on the Bitcoin thing, I mean, just one comment. I think first of all, I think, with the real collapse of religion in the world, I just think we're seeing new forms of it. And I think Bitcoin is one form of it. Okay. There's a lot of elements of the sacred to what's going on in Bitcoin, right? I have a degree in theology. I studied it for a long time. And
no way.
I do. And it's got the sacred written all over it. Okay.
Have you ever read there's a book, The Power of Ritual?
I don't know if I've read that specific
Absolutely
book.
love the book. Anyway, we could talk about that. That's another topic. But yeah,
That's probably
I love
maybe our next conversation. But I mean, it's the amount of rituals and sort of sacred. I mean,
yes,
like Satoshi himself, right? It plays this
exactly
this
this
figure, right?
ethereal god.
Like,
exactly. We don't even. It's fascinating, isn't it?
100%. But like
I couldn't agree more.
The other thing that's going on with crypto and with NFTs and Bitcoin is that I think there's this mimetic rivalry and game that everybody's playing, because what I've noticed is that everybody in crypto is basically trying to be smarter than the next person. And like everybody's sort of like saying, well, I know something that you know, and if you just understood it the way that I understood it, then it would all make sense. And there's almost this weird like mimetic rivalry for like knowledge, or like esoteric knowledge even, right?
Right.
And it's like, and that's happening all over the place. That's like, it's happening on Twitter. Like everybody's got to have a smarter, sharper take than the next person.
Right.
And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to play that mimetic rivalry game. Like, I'd actually rather be good and loving than smart, than trying to be smarter than everybody else. I'd rather compete on a different playing field.
I agree.
Anyways, but I mean, when it just becomes about like signaling your intelligence, then, which is what a lot of crypto is about, the people that are fans of crypto. I mean, some people genuinely understand it, but there's a lot of like game playing around that. Anyways, I think that's incredibly thin and superficial. And
right, because you talk about these thin and thick desires. So maybe we should touch on that. So these are, your book talks about that, right?
Yeah. So I mean, the way that I define a thin desire is the kind that, is ultimately going to disappoint you, right? It's the kind of desire that you're pursuing there's really nothing real underneath it, right? It's kind of like an infatuation or a crush. You sort of realize that it was empty, right? There was like nothing to sort of like build on. There's no layers or depth to it. And I think, some people are going to invest years of their life, like going down the rabbit hole of a white paper for a cryptocurrency that's not even going to be around a couple of years from now. And that's like the definition of a thin desire, right? It's fleeting, right. It goes away. A thick desire has layers and depth to it, right? And it's the kind of desire that you can invest in and cultivate for the rest of your life, quite frankly, right? Like a relationship with your child, right? Or your partner. Certain like you could be like a love of beauty that manifests itself through music, like the kinds of things that represent like a real core part of who we are, that are like under the surface of all of the kind of thin things that all of us pursue. I do it all the time, right? I catch myself like chasing the next shiny object. And then I realize, partly because, my wife lets me know when I'm being hyper mimetic and chasing thin things. And I got good friends that help me too. And then I have a better degree of self-knowledge now than I did when I was younger. And I'm able to sort of see the shallowness or the thinness of those things and not waste my time pursuing them. It could be like some recognition that I need that doesn't actually mean shit, right? And it's just causing me to get distracted. So, learning to understand the difference between what's thin and what's thick, I think, is one of the most important skills that we can develop in life. And that's what the whole second half of the book is about, right. As you know.
Right. So let's touch on that. So you want to move towards the thick desires, and then, and like I said in the beginning, I love the word you use, metamorphosis, because it's a deep transformation, and it's not easy, right? Because you've got to change so much. It's so much more than saying, hey, I want to lose 20 pounds, right? You've got to essentially change your identity. You've got to change your mimetics. You've got to realize that, those TV shows you watch are maybe contributing to it. Those people you hang around, the family you're around, these are tough things to solve, right? So how do we, it sounds great in theory. I want to be better at saving money. I want to, there's these personal transformations, and there's societal transformations, right? And they all sound great in theory. And this is why, again, I love your book so much, because it shows just the difficulty of you really need a self-identity transformation to do that. And it starts with changing your role models. So can you tell us, like, how do you do that? How do you how do you metamorphosize?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it starts with just getting good at identifying your thick desires in the first place. That's step number one before you can even think about undergoing that transformation or that metamorphosis. And in order to do that, I believe that you can't do it while you're swimming in the same waters that you've been in, right? You in a sense, you have to remove yourself. You have to extract yourself from the mimetic environment that you've been in. Okay. Whether that means you've been on social media, you need to unplug for the amount of time that you need in order for the dust to settle, for you to see things clearly. So I would not have been able to see my thin desires for my thick desires if I had not unplugged and sort of went off grid for weeks. Well, in my case, it was months at a time. I think it's really important to create the distance, right? Not necessarily geographical distance, but call it spiritual distance between you and all of the different models in your life, to just be able to look at things objectively.
Yeah, I mean, oh, sorry. I thought you
No, go ahead.
I was going to say what really helped me too was role models I found. I mean, I'm in this incredibly strange, really strange netherworld where, sometimes I'm in front of 20,000 people in Germany screaming for me. And the next I'm in a, middle income neighborhood in Las Vegas. Sometimes I'm playing at a massive club in Miami. Other times I'm doing small town, Northern Alberta, Canada. And it's this juxtaposition that I've actually found awesome role models. And I think that is the first step. And for me, what was helpful was actually getting to know some of them quite well, from, touring with the Backstreet Boys. I never became intimately friends with them, but I was able to see them on a deep backstage level. Wow. And what I saw really, really amazed and impressed me. And I think what's important is number one is understanding your own fallibility. I think that's just so critical. It's understanding that there's forces that you're not aware of. Number one. Right. Number two, we are all fallible. We all have weak points. No matter how smart we are, there's ways to outsmart us. No matter how strong we are, there's simple leverage points that even an average person, like I can bench press 300 pounds, but there's average strength people that, if you know how to work my body right, can out leverage me. And when you're aware of these weak points and understand how they can be used to exploit you, you can also understand how you can use them in reverse to exploit yourself in a positive way. So like, sure. Seeing the Backstreet Boys and their incredible humility, not just in front of fans, but just in dealing with the people backstage. I'll never forget, when I was on my first show with them in Portugal, and I walked into like the cafeteria area, and I was like, and the first person I see to my left was a guy that looked like Nick Carter. And then I realized it was Nick Carter. You know what I mean? And he's just chilling with the crew, and you can tell by their body language, like he showed deference to them and he showed appreciation and respect. And I'll never forget such an incredible act of, I'll never be more grateful than probably one of the coolest gifts I've ever had, which is, still hanging on my wall, which you can't really see, but it's an autographed jersey. I don't know if you're a hockey fan or not, but it was it's an autographed jersey by the team captain of Team Finland a week after they won the world championships. And just the level of humility from Howie. He came to my dressing room. It was the last day of my show on the tour. And he, he came to say goodbye and thank you. And he saw Darude. Do you know the song Sandstorm? Yeah. So Darude is from Finland. He got connected to me. He's a hockey fan. He's literally backstage with me, teaching me Finnish to talk to the crowd. We're both wearing Team Finland jerseys because we're both hockey fans. In comes Howie, who's meeting Darude. So these two legendary icons, the 2000s, right? Meeting for the first time in my dressing room. I've got my mentor who's touring with Metallica, but happens to have a down day. So he's coming to visit me. And I'm literally like, that's probably the high point of my career, I'd say.
Did you go out there and speak Finnish?
I did. I've actually got a video of it. It's pretty awesome.
That's awesome.
That's one of my ways of connecting with people is I would tour, and whether I was in Germany or Finland or Norway, or Portugal, I would learn key words and I would learn them phonetically. So I'd have a native speaker teach me certain things to say, and I would write them. I wouldn't have them write them. I would write them how I would pronounce them.
What you heard. Yeah.
Right. So I would have it, written down there, and I would announce it to the crowd, and I'd be like, yo, I'm Knowledge. I come from Las Vegas. And then I would say something in German or whatever. Right. And it was such a wonderful way to connect with people.
It only takes a couple of words, man, to get that
right,
to get that respect, exactly. and establish that connection. It doesn't take much.
It's that connection. It's that demonstration of deference. Hey, I'm in Germany, and you guys love the whole Vegas thing, but at the same time, I'm showing, hey, man, I'm learning. I'll never forget when I was in Italy and I did that. And when I came off the stage, the security started speaking to me in Italian. And I didn't understand him. And he was so blown away because he heard me speaking Italian on stage. And he was like, how is it possible that you don't know Italian?
Thought you spoke Italian? Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, because I said things, like I said, I really took the effort to make it Italian sounding, right? Without an accent, and the guy was just blown away, right? And I love connecting with people in these little ways. I remember a security guy in Germany who was Kurdish, right? And I'm Syrian, and not only am I Syrian, I have admiration for the Kurdish people and their struggle, and not a lot of people know that, right? So I mentioned some people that are big in their culture. This guy was like, oh my God, this DJ from Vegas opening up for the Backstreet Boys knows about me and my people and our struggle. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's I always try to find ways to make these bridges with people. I think it's so critical, man. And we're losing that connection with people.
Yeah.
And I think, and I think where it starts is when we can communicate ideas like yours, and make people realize there's so many more reasons to actually connect. The problem is, we're wired to be fearful and angry, like we talked about, these thin desires. And when people are aware of this, that's the first step.
Man, I mean, one thick desire that I'm confident that every human being has is the desire to know and be known by other people, right? Just to feel like you're known. And,
and appreciated.
And appreciated. And if we feel like we're known by somebody, that person could have completely different ideas than we do, but there's just a level of appreciation there, right? Where, the knowing sort of provides a basis for dialogue. And without the knowing, we just put people in boxes, we categorize them, we label them politically or whatever. And that is a thick desire that everybody has. So what you're doing there, right? That like opening that door, empathizing, the littlest thing to establish a connection. That's a way, and it's amazing. Sometimes it only takes one person to just open a tiny door, and it changes the whole disposition of a person, and changes the way that they relate to you and the things they talk about. They stop being closed off. So that is like the number one thing, and I talk about it in the book, right? Like that. Establishing that empathy, modeling like the desire to know people at a deep level. When you do that for other people, they tend to do it back to you, right? So part of mimetic desire is like model the things, like treat people the way that you would like to be treated. Because if it's true that desire is mimetic, then you doing that, you taking that first step is going to result in more, right? And it's going to change everything.
Yeah, and I think there's a power dynamic there. And I think there's certain politicians that are masters of that. They're masters of connecting. And I think that is a huge part of the analysis that detractors lose. They don't quite understand. So like, I'm going to get a little bit political here when I talk about Trump. People love to hate Trump and dismiss him and his followers. And I think they underestimate him. I might not be a fan of his politics, but I do appreciate his ability to connect. I've watched his speeches. He knows how to do exactly what you're talking about, right? He knows how to validate people and give them a feeling of appreciation and listen to them. And I think that we need to do more of that. And I think that we need a bridge. How do we bring, so, I mean, when you really look at it, a good politician should be good at that. But we live in this hyper-connected world of mimetic desires. And I think that's one of the key roots of that's fundamental, like that we're wired for, like you said. We need to be appreciated. And the people that are going to do that for us are going to be the ones that are going to win us over.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, it's not entirely clear to me, like how authentic, Trump is in doing that. Right. Because some people,
but it doesn't matter to those people. They're
It's
authentic to him.
It's the perception, right? It's the perception. Right. And I think some people really genuinely care, and other people are really good at making people, believe that they are or think that they are.
And we're wired for that. And we're wired. We can literally see, they've done brain scans of people where, they'll say something completely disregarding facts. And you can literally watch people's brains, parts of people's brains shut down, like the prefrontal cortex, actually shut down when faced with facts that are contradictory to their self-identity. So if it's whether it's a religion they follow or a politician they love or a fitness, whatever it is. So, when the mimetic desire takes on, I think to me, so this is me sort of extrapolating from your book. It's, we've got the Celebristan that then diffuses into Freshmanistan at such a powerful level, and people surround themselves with these types. It literally breaks down the logical part of the brain, and they're willing to disregard facts and play a narrative. And a more accurate way to put it would be they cherry pick facts, because there's such a wide margin of error, right? All you have to do to love Trump is cherry pick the stuff you like. All you have to do to hate Trump is cherry pick the stuff you hate, right? Now, a rational person would look at it all and they'd say, well, okay, he's done this, that's great. Or he's done that, that's horrible. Overall, what is the impact? And putting in context, this is president of the United States and what he needs. When you look at that, that would be the rational way to do it, which we're losing now. And so, and I think a lot of it is because these hacks into our brains have been weaponized, and social media has amplified and weaponized these in ways. And I think, again, that's where your book can play such a powerful role in making people aware of that.
Yeah. Everything has been absolutized, right? We're just not able to view the whole person anymore. And even people are being claimed by sides, right? Like people are literally being claimed by sides.
Elon Musk is a great example.
Yeah. And there's some comedian, I think it's Chappelle, who's got a really hilarious like skit about this, right? Like how people are like claiming people, right? To, as different races and different like either, liberal, conservative or whatever. And it's funny to think like most people can't name a single shared model in American culture, somebody that's universally sort of like respected. It's hard to name one now, right? It used to be that we had some, but it's hard, like right and left both respect this person, kind of equally. I sent out that question on Twitter a few months ago, and I only got one answer, and it was Dolly Parton. And I was like, I'm not even sure if that's right, but I got close. Nothing better than that. It's pretty close.
I'd have to say, right? That's pretty close. She's country, which probably means she skews to a certain demographic, Republican-ish. She's a wonderful person.
Yeah.
I mean, she really is. If you actually look at her history and what she's done, and she's wonderful. Absolutely.
But I think how hard it is to find them really say something kind of horrifying, right, about our tendency to just not see the whole person, right? And
the wonderful things Dear Leader has done and disregarding the absolutely awful things Dear Leader has done.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right. So,
yeah.
So how do we, so let's finish off with how do we move towards this? How do we get society? How do we get individuals to say, I need this metamorphosis. I want to go from thin to thick desires. We need to be aware. Starts with that. We need to surround ourselves by ideas. So is that like as simple as, I remember doing one thing once. I used to follow everybody on social media. Now I'm hyper vigilant, man. I filter.
Well, thanks for following me.
Oh man.
Well, yeah, man. I mean, I think it's it comes down to being hyper intentional, really intentional about who we surround ourselves with and who we're following.
I love that.
Who we're letting affect us, right?
I love that.
We've got to choose our models wisely, and we're free to choose who our models are. If we don't choose, then somebody else is going to choose for us. Okay.
I love that.
That's the way that it works.
If you don't choose, someone is going to choose it for you. I like be hyper intentional.
And
I love that, man. You need to copyright that.
Maybe I will. And there's a process that we have to go through.
I will license it from you.
Nice. As a society, I think it just happens on a personal and community level, right? Like at the local level, like we start with our lives, right? And we model that, and that's contagious, right? When people see us like taking the time and investment to be intentional about what it is that we're going to pursue and invest our time and energy in, that affects them. And in my case, I had to undergo a kind of death, right? I don't think there's any metamorphosis without death, right? I mean, it's the old kind of like, cocoon, trope, but it's true. I went from, being an entrepreneur, living a high flying Vegas lifestyle, to moving to Italy for 3 years and living a very different kind of life. And part of me had to die to a bit of my ego because, and the idea that, people didn't associate me with the way that I used to be. And part of me really wanted them to, but I was different, right? I was in a new season of life and I had slowed down.
People had to associate you with something that you were or people could no longer associate you.
And they wanted to, right? They really wanted to, right? I'd have people visit me from Vegas or New York, and because they knew
so that's a true metamorphosis, I think.
Yeah, and I would have to, and I had two choices to make when they would visit me. Be like, well, Luke, you used to take us to Tao when you lived in Vegas and party with us. Aren't we going to do the same thing now that we're visiting you here in Italy? And it's like, that's not what we're doing here. I'm doing a different thing. That's not what I'm here for, and part of me, and it wasn't always easy for me to do that because there was that tension there, but I was there on a mission, and my mission was to understand and invest in my thick desires more because I had spent too much of my life going down roads that disappointed me. So I had to die to that part of myself.
But you had that juxtaposition, and I feel like maybe we share that. And it's so fascinating listening to you because I'm taking mental notes when you're saying that because I'm going through the same thing, and I've gone through a similar thing. I'd like to think I'm kind of dying a slow death right now. I've divorced myself in many elements of Vegas for quite some time, but for a lot of reasons. I mean, for financial. I mean, number one, I quit drinking. I'm a dad. I have obviously my girlfriend that I want one day to be my wife and my child. But it does go deeper than that. I've lost my desire to try and get status by being cool, but I'm also aware that it gives me a bigger voice when I do that. So it's really, it's something I'm still trying to find. And literally, ironically, I'm starting it with this podcast with you.
I love it, man. I mean, it's funny. I guess being a parent sort of naturally has a way of changing a person's desires almost instantaneously, right?
You don't have any kids, right?
Not yet, but I just got married last summer, and that also does something.
And,
I'll tell you, man.
And how old are you?
40.
Yeah, so I'm 40. I'm 46 in a few weeks. So, dude, it's the greatest thing ever. So that's all I'm going to say.
I can't wait, and I'll tell you, marriage
Yeah.
changed me in a more powerful way than I even thought it would. And I thought that it would, but my desire, like it was almost like that very night, I was a different person. And I imagine, having a kid is the same way. At least that's what
Absolutely.
I've heard. So,
It is, man.
life
I mean,
has a way of helping us go through this metamorphosis kind of naturally,
yep.
just based on the choices that we make.
I couldn't agree more. And man, you have, in your book, has touched me, and I hope other people, I hope by having this talk, you're going to touch more people. I want to make that similar metamorphosis. I want to make it from my music and everything I've learned, and say, hey, there's a lot that I gained that was good from that. Even if it's just simply saying, I know not to do that, and here's why I know not to do that. I have a whole new appreciation for my parents and their culture, and it, because of my diverse backgrounds, instead of saying this sucks, that sucks, I can look at stuff differently. And I think the foundation of it is exactly what you talked about, man. So I hope people really take their time to engage in this and start that metamorphosis. I'm hoping to have more guests like yourself that I really think will move society. And that's my mission, is to use my music and to use my awareness and try to get more people to understand, to help clear the noise and bring, powerful voices like yours that need to be seen by more people.
Well, thanks so much, Will, man. I mean, I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope to see you next time I'm out in Vegas.
Who knows, man? Maybe I'll be in
bread.
Michigan, right? So
let me know. Hit me up.
You never know, man. I really hope this isn't the last time we talk. So
it definitely won't be.
Yeah, man. And we got to keep ourselves updated, and hope we keep moving, finding ways to move forward.
Appreciate that, man. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, man. Luke Burgis, y'all, get the book, Wanting. Thanks for joining us, man. For real.
Thanks so much, man. Peace.